This is an overview of Marathon Petroleum Company's firm analysis by Michael Garrett Stringer. Marathon was initially established in 1887 as a conglomerate of several smaller oil companies in one region who wanted to combine together into one larger corporation. And since then, Marathon has seen almost 150 years of service to the U.S., which has pushed them past the growth and shakeout stages of corporate life, and now their company is in the maturing phase, as they are focusing mostly on cost and operational efficiencies in their day to day life as a way to keep maintaining competitive advantage and profit. They are also the largest refiner in the United States, with 13 refineries across the country. This size and capability allows them to produce about 3 million barrels of crude oil per day, and they have a complete upstream to downstream system of operations, allowing them the upstream mining to the midstream of the refineries, all the way to their downstream retailers, being their corner shop, gas stations, and also a series of other products such as asphalt, roofing technologies, coatings, adhesives, and specialty chemicals. The oil and gas industry is the second largest industry in the world, second only to wireless telecommunication carriers across the globe. So, to understand this industry and Marathon's position in it, we're going to take a look at Porter's five forces. The threat of new entry is very low just due to the high barriers of entry being strictly insane amounts of capital investment to have a company that can start competing with the likes of Exxon or Shell or Marathon, of course. But due to this, there is high competitive rivalry, mostly between the larger publicly traded companies, which Marathon is a part of. There are some private companies, but they typically operate in smaller and more niche markets and don't inherently compete with the likes of that Exxon, Shell, or Marathon. Supplier power is also very high in this field due to how the oil is mined and then processed in these upstream to downstreams. There's so much control that these companies have over the raw material that leads to the products that the buyer power is very small and the suppliers hold all the cards. As far as threat of substitution goes, there is some threat when looking at nuclear power, solar power, these renewable energies, electricity, but we are decades away from having something that is able to compete on the same level as the oil and gas industry is now. So while there is threat and it should be taken into consideration, it is something to look towards for the future. Now, Marathon within all of this is a company that works in the national market. They aren't incredibly international as Exxon and Shell and so many of these other companies are spread out across the globe. Marathon really focuses on North America and particularly the United States. And with this in mind, it allows them to focus heavily on what they already have set up, which is why they are the largest refiner in the country. The day to day life of these companies are dynamic and chaotic on the best of days, and Marathon is having to compete with companies such as Shell and Exxon, and that means for the largest majority of profit, gasoline and oil. As Marathon in their retail distributes their gasoline to the common consumer, they're having to work in a constant state of flux with gas prices going up and down every single day. With this in mind, communication is most important when looking at the corporate structure that Marathon currently has and how particularly different implementations and directions of that structure could potentially make their communication lines more efficient and more effective in working in this steady changing environment. Marathon's corporate structure is very horizontal, it's very linear, with their compartments separated, and the upstream is only connected to the downstream by the refineries through one bottleneck. And while this can give the benefit of each of these departments having more autonomy and control and responsibility over their day to day operations and efficiency, which is good for the company, it can also hinder or slow the communication from the upstream to the downstream and the downstream to the upstream. So I believe that a reorganization of company structure by working in more MOCs and more communications between that downstream to mid to upstream can keep that information flowing more efficiently and effectively so that the marathon can compete in a quicker way in this very dynamic and ever changing industry that is oil and gas. As stated previously, there is some threat of substitution by new renewable energies. The world as a society of humans is attempting to go green and push for these newer energies such as nuclear power or solar power, these electrical vehicles. More and more oil in these fossil fuels, they're depleting across the globe, and eventually we will run out of them. So, as we look down the line at the next 2 or 3 decades, as these energies and technologies become more advanced, we have to look at how Marathon's going to operate with this and how we react to maintain a presence in the industry and the world as a whole. We believe the answer to this is by investing now in what we think will come in the future. Although we're still decades out, if Marathon is able to work into its corporate structure and the company goals and values, diving more into renewable energies, these fossil fuel replacements of electricity, of nuclear power, of solar technology, which in 2023 overtook oil as the most invested in industry in the world. We need to be looking at these things from a future perspective, looking at the temporal aspects of how Marathon can maintain a presence in the world. And this is done by investing in companies, in startups, by assimilating them into the corporate structure, and by working in the R&D field to make sure that Marathon is staying on top of this and is maintaining a presence in the industry, whether it be with the traditional oil or whether it be with something new. Marathon is also an American based company, and with this focus primarily on the United States, they aren't able to diversify away the risk of being a large oil and gas company, as well as some of these international companies who are able to spread their refineries and their processes across the globe. As Marathon is completely compliant to all political regulations such as taxes, tariffs, and government control over the oil industry. Also, the geographical commitments and danger of weather patterns such as earthquakes, hurricanes, and tornadoes that could shut down a refinery and cause the loss of millions of barrels of product per week. Or the social climate of pushing to go green and decrease a carbon footprint, which is solely concentrated in America and not diversified away by operating in various countries and theaters like many of these other corporations do. With this in mind, Marathon should look at one, forming government contracts and agreements to establish known prices and taxes and tariffs on their product for certain amounts of time in order to look at decreasing that risk in the flux of change, and also expanding their borders, particularly into countries such as Canada and Mexico, or even in South America, as Venezuela has the most oil reserves on the planet. Placing refineries in these different countries can allow them more safety geographically and politically, and also decrease some of the social stress and strain that this company might have on its production. Marathon also makes lots of different products and specialty chemicals from the refining process. The cracking distillation diversifies the crude oil into so many different gases and products and compounds, and of course, gasoline, that they distribute this to other companies that then take those products and make more specialty products with them. They fit these niches. And with this, while Marathon is making profit by selling these products, these raw materials to these companies are flipping them and they're making much more money off of them. And Marathon should take this into consideration. By purchasing and assimilating some of these smaller corporations, these private companies, into Marathon's corporate structure, they can take these niche markets that their buyers are filling, and they'll have the full upstream to downstream from their refinery to the actual niche customer. And with this, not only will they be diversifying their risk by buying other corporations, they'll be maximizing their profits off of what are just their offshoots, And they'll also be increasing the value of this company by spreading it amongst many other smaller corporations that can fit into this horizontal structure and continue to manage themselves while the profits can still go to Marathon. In conclusion, every company in the world has threats and inconsistencies and issues both externally and internally. But by taking this analysis and looking at this overview of Marathon and how they can expand their reach and diversify away their risk while also increasing value, Marathon can continue to propel itself into the future and maintain its stance as the forefront of oil and gas in America for years and decades to come.